Visual Calculations is now available in Power BI. You can download the latest version of Power BI Desktop and start using Visual Calcs today. We are all excited about this great feature, and many of us believe that this is one of the best features that has been added to the Power BI recently. But there are some questions in the community which haven't been answered yet. Those questions are about performance of Visual Calcs, Scanner API, and custom visual. So I gathered all those common questions from LinkedIn, Twitter, and Power BI community, and then I thought that, okay, there is no one better than Jay, the DAX boss, to answer those questions. So let me call him and discover his insights. Hello, Jay. Thanks for accepting my invitation. There are some questions. I was thinking about those questions actually, and I said, okay, who is better than Jay, the DAX boss, to answer those questions? So there are 7 questions. I checked the community after the previous session we had here in the Persian Power BI user group, and you show all the details about the visual calculations. There is a great blog you wrote on the Power BI blog website, so people can read that and find some information. But in the community and in the Twitter, X actually, and the LinkedIn, I found that people are looking for some information. And so I selected 7 main questions here, and we can go through that one by one.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. And thanks for doing this. This is great. Also, thanks for everybody who's has already started working with Visual Calcs and has discovered it. And even though the documentation wasn't out, even though the blog wasn't out, we still don't have all the functions documented by now, but maybe by the time this goes out, they will be documented, but we're working hard through them. But yeah, there is docs pages out there right now that kind of explain these limitations, but let's just go through the questions and then we can point you to where you can find more information, okay?
Perfect. So the first question, which is the most common question, is about do all visuals support visual calculations? Because we have many visuals in the Power BI. So how many of them we can use when we use for using like visual calcs in there?
So you can't use all visuals today, but the plan is to absolutely support all visuals, all built-in visuals, as well as enable all custom visuals to work with Visual Calc. So there's 2 groups of visuals that we see, right? Built in, so the ones in the product, and then the custom visuals that are built by some other part of Microsoft or some other organization or some individuals. So just to separate those 2 things, today we don't support all built-in visuals. So that's absolutely something that we're working on to make sure that we eventually support all built-in visuals. That's very clear. The second one, we can't promise you all custom visuals will work because simply we don't own the code for those, right? What we will do is we will enable custom visual makers to use Visual Calcs and enable Visual Calcs for their custom visuals. So we'll work with them to update the APIs to build what they need. But if a custom visual creator doesn't want to update their custom visual just to support Visual Calcs, that's their decision. We cannot force that decision. We won't be able to, right? Because we don't own that piece of code. But we will give them the ability to do that. So we will enable them to support Visual Calcs in their custom visual. But we cannot promise it will happen because, well, it's simply their custom visual. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's really great because this shows there is a good future for the visual calculations. And if you open the doors for those custom visuals, then it depends. They want to add that to their custom visuals or not. I believe that this visual calcs will solve many issues and make our life easier and easier. Okay, so let's go through that.
For today, the current state, if you go into the product, and I'll actually share my screen and I'll show you.
Okay.
For the built-in visual, we actually have been very clear of which visuals we know don't work. It's also on our documentation list, but we also added it into our product. So if you are in here, if you are in Visual Calcs edit mode, you'll see that there's some visual types that are grayed out. You see that?
Yep.
Those are not supported. You can't click them. You can't select those. Nothing happens. You cannot even switch to these visual types outside of Visual Calcs edit mode if there's a Visual Calc on your on your visual. So those are not supported. So that's also the list that is in our documentation. But if you're ever like, this will be the latest version, right? So whenever you see a visual being enabled in here, it basically means we did all the work to make sure it actually works. But these visuals that are here, that are grayed out, don't work. Like combo charts, or like scatter plots, or the maps, or key influencers, just to name a few.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Okay.
Okay, so let's go through the second question. So if you use the visual calc, so add a visual to a report and then create some visual calculation on that visual, can we transfer the visual calculation from one visual to another visual or not?
Not yet. You will be, but not yet.
Not yet. Okay, perfect.
No.
That's
So
great.
we want to make, we're thinking about what the reuse story should be. The minimum level we want to go for is copy paste. Like, hey, I have got a visual calc over here. I want to copy that to the other visual, right? So that's one thing. But there's other things you could imagine we do, like find a way to store that visual calc somehow so you could easily point to it, right? Or maybe promote them into a measure. But those things are not easy to do. Also, if we just went back and rewrite every visual calc, even if we could, into a measure, we would kind of negate the whole value of visual calcs, which is performance and ease of use and flexibility with being able to refer to the visual structure. Putting that stuff back into a measure basically gets rid of all of that. So that's kind of like backwards thinking. So that's not what we want to do as the only option. So we're thinking about those options, but definitely copy paste is something that we want to do. But today there's no way for you to reuse, except of course duplicate the visual, which is not
Duplicate
great.
the visual. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. So, okay, so let's go through the next one. Actually, the next question has two parts. The first part is, does the visual calculations are part of the model, the data model, or they are not part of the data model? Oh, so,
They're
and
not,
if it's
they're not part of the data model.
Okay, so how does it work in that case?
They are part of the visual definitions. They are part of the report definition file. So,
okay, so
they are defined on the visual. They're not in your model. And that's on purpose, because by doing that, they can and will reuse the aggregated data that the visual has already pulled from the source. So measures are always individually evaluated, so they cannot reuse aggregations that already exist, or aggregated data that was already retrieved for a different measure. They won't do that. They will always go back to the source. Visual calcs won't do that. They will just live on the visual. So if the visual has already retrieved the data, the visual calc will also use that same aggregated data without going back to the source. So that's why they are not in the model, because putting them into model would mean they have to behave more like measures, which would bring them always back to the lowest level, as well as the added complexity of the DAX you would have to write. So they are not in the model for that reason.
Okay, that's perfect. Okay, so if that's not a model, so the next question is it possible to combine visual calcs with normal DAX? I'm not sure we need to call it normal DAX or not, but can we mix them together or combine them together?
Yeah. So there are some functions that you can't use. So let me be clear. Visual calcs is just DAX. However, you cannot use all DAX in visual calcs, and also you cannot use all the stuff that you can do in visual calcs in measures and calculator columns, right? So because visual calcs live on the visual only, functions that refer to the model are not available in visual calcs. For example, use relationship or related table. Those concepts don't exist because there is no concept of a model in a visual calc, so you cannot use those functions. Trying to use those will just give you an error. So that's one class of functions that you cannot use inside of visual calcs from regular DAX, if you will. There's functions that don't make a lot of sense to use. You can use them, but the results might not be useful to you depending on your business case. So that's another category. And then there's a whole lot of functions that will just work, like if and switch and calculate and all those things, yes, will all work. Like, so there's a whole bunch of functions, sumx, maxx, average, those kind of things will all work. Will just be fine. So it is DAX, but then not everything is as useful, and some things will just simply not work because of the model not being there. We're actually working on updating our documentation when you are on the functions page of a function, that you can see whether or not you can use them in Visual Calcs or whether they make sense to be used in Visual Calcs, yes or no. So that's something that's coming as well on our documentation side to update that.
Yep.
Then the flip side is there are functions that you can only use in Visual Calcs. And those functions are the functions that only have a signature that includes the axis parameter. So if you have a function that only has the signature with axis for rows and columns, then that function can only be used in Visual Calcs. So running sum and moving average, previous, first, next, last, collapse, expand all, collapse all, those are the functions you can only use in Visual Calcs. You cannot use those in measures because they only have a signature that refers to axes, and axes is only available in Visual Calcs. There is a class of functions that you can use in measures as well as in Visual Calcs that also have the axis parameter, and those are the window functions. The window functions that we released in December 2022 do have signatures that include axes, so you can use that signature in Visual Calcs because axis is available there, but they also have a signature that doesn't include axis, but just relies on order by and partition by. So those functions you can use in both measures as well as in Visual Calcs. So the rule is very simple. Well, simple, I hope it's relatively clear by now. If the function only has a signature that accepts an axis, there's no other signature, you need to have an axis, then that function is only available in Visual Calcs mode. If a function has both signatures, one with axis and one without, you can use that function in both environments, Visual Calcs and non-Visual Calcs. And then extra, there are some functions that you cannot use in the Visual Calcs mode because they refer back to the model, like use relationship.
Yeah. So in that case, can we use the Visual Calcs in the new DAX Query Editor or not?
Yes, you can absolutely write Visual Calcs expressions in the DAX Query Editor. In fact, once you start working with Visual Calcs, if you open Performance Analyzer, you can copy the query that the Visual Calc thing generated and put it into the DAX Query View and see all the results.
Yeah,
that will absolutely work.
That's great, because that's related to my next questions. So how does the performance of the Visual Calcs compare to other normal DAX functions?
Right. So that's a great question. So first off, the DAX Query View, if you do that today, you will see some red squigglies because we haven't completed the work for all the IntelliSense there. So the query will run. It will give you results, but it might show you weird, like as if it doesn't recognize it. But that's just a temporary thing. Performance-wise, Visual Calcs on average are, I mean, it's really hard to give an average number, but in general, they are much faster than measures because measures they always go back to the lowest level of data. Visual Calcs don't do that. Like, for example, if you're asking for a running sum of something over 5 years, the maximum number of numbers that Visual Calcs will have to add together is 5. There's 5 years. The last cell will have to have 5 numbers added together, right? Those 5 numbers might have millions of sales records under them. So when you did a running sum in a measure, what the measure would do is go for each year, sum up all the individual amounts of all the individual sales records for each year, and for this one, and for that one, and that one, and that one, eventually being always slower than what a Visual Calc will do, because a Visual Calc would just take these numbers and just add them one by one. So to give you an extreme example, if you created a visual that has 6 measures on them, there would be 6 trips back to the source eventually, because there's 6 measures to be evaluated. If you rewrote all of those 6 measures as Visual Calcs, you would have just 1 trip to the source, just to retrieve the data once, and then each Visual Calc would just run on the retrieved data, right? So in this example, instead of potentially six full table scans of all your data with the 6 measures, you would have just one to create the visual onto your screen, and then the visual calcs would just hit this one scan that has happened and never going back to the source. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's great.
Okay.
So last question.
Yep.
The last question is, if we have a Power BI report with more than, let's say, 10 pages, and each page has, for example, 5 visual, how we can find and how can we identify which visuals have visual calcs in that Power BI desktop report or PBIX5?
Not yet.
Okay. Okay.
No, simply not there yet. But we are absolutely thinking about that. So there's many things that we're working on and thinking about. So we're thinking about what the experience should be in desktop, and potentially we're thinking about doing some kind of pane that says, here are all the visual calcs in this file, and you can see the name and see the expression. If you click on it, you go to the visual on which the visual calc has been defined. Something like that could be great. I would like that pane then to also be extensible in the future. So I could imagine people wanting to see measures in there. And what about calc columns and, other stuff potentially that they want to discover, right? So that's something that we're thinking about at the moment. The other thing is not directly related to desktop, but it's after you publish the file to the service. We're extending the scanner API to include visual calcs information. So as an admin, you will be able to scan in the workspaces, in the reports, what visual calcs are on those reports.
That's great, because that was the second part of this question about the Power BI service, because when we run the scanner API, we can see some of those measures, table queries and everything. But in the future, we will be able to see the visual calcs in that scanner API. That would be great. That would be
so
really great.
And that is something we're already working on. So that will come earlier than that pane that we just talked about in the desktop. That is just thoughts and ideas that we have right now. But that scanner API is already being worked on. So we are fully aware that admins would like that ability. So and the real value for that scanner API is for the admin to see what visual calcs people are building, and then say, hey, everybody's building the same kind of visual calc over and over and over again. That might be a good candidate for me to add to my enterprise semantic model to store as a measure. So we're all looking at the same definition, right? So I see that scanner API ability also as a way for the admin to learn how people are using the system and go like, there's a visual calc that everybody is just creating. But really, if we just wrote it down once in the model as a measure and everybody just used that thing, that would be better than everybody just creating the visual calc on their own, right? And so in that way, the ability to scan for visual calcs using the scanner API can also be a way for the admin to communicate to the end users, like, and see what they are doing and be proactive about, okay, I'll in my next version of the enterprise semantic model, I'll add the measure that you all have been created as a visual calc, right? And then you can just replace the visual calc with that measure.
That's great.
Does that make sense?
That would, that would be great. That scanner API is really powerful, and if you can see those visual calcs there, that's really great. Perfect. That was all the question. So
hey, before we wrap up, I have a question to you. Like, what's your favorite part of visual calcs then?
Well, to be honest, I've been using that since when the February version is out, and I love that running sum more than everything, because I have people in my team. There are some of them are professional, write everything in DAX, but some of them are new in this one. When we had a meeting and we talk about that, those people love that too much, because with few clicks they can find the outcome, they can find the result they were looking for. That maybe they don't know that much DAX and they need always help from the others, but now it's few clicks. That's really great. And actually, there was a question in that meeting. At the moment, we have eight templates for the visual calcs, Is there any plan to make that bigger and bigger in the future, or no, it's set on 8?
No, I'm happy to extend it to, this is just what we think are the most popular things that people want to do. But we're absolutely planning to extend that with maybe new functions that we might add in the future, because we haven't published all the functions that we're thinking about. So we have a couple more functions coming down the pipe that we weren't quite ready for. So I would expect us to extend that list of templates there. Also, I want to be mindful of the number of templates that we provide. I don't want to go and provide like a drop down of 50 items. I don't think that's usable. So also our telemetry will tell us what templates people find useful, right? So we can already see that the running sum that you mentioned, the percent of parents and the versus previous are in the top 3 of templates that people pick. That might just be because, they're just trying. So we're not making any decisions now, but I could imagine maybe us removing some templates in the future, because we know, our documentation's out there, people can learn it anyway, and then get some extra room for more templates, because I don't want to end up in the list of like 25 or 30 templates. I don't think that's useful. So like maximum 10, 15 would be like the golden number for me. So yeah, whenever we kind of get close to that number, I'll take a look at the telemetry and then decide like, okay, this template is not very, very popular, so let me switch it out for something else. And then I think there's another question behind your question, which is something that I heard before, is like, hey, can I, as an organization, define my own templates in here? Right? So it's great that you, as Microsoft, build in templates, but can I have like my organizational store of templates? That's a great question, but it's not something we're doing right now. It's like, that is not for, like, Visual Calcs is already such a huge feature. So that is definitely not a scope for the near future. No.
No. Okay. That's perfect. That's really good. That's really good. And I know you post on the community and ask people to add the comments there. So it would be great. I will add that post link in description of this video. They can go there and add their feedback there. So then maybe based on those feedbacks, something new will be added to that Visual Calc area.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the place where we're collecting feedback, and of course we're looking at everything that you're saying on social media, or at least as much as we can see. So we're monitoring wherever we can. But yeah, absolutely. If you have specific feedback, I'm happy to receive it from you. And the Visual Calculations feedback link is indeed the easiest way for me to collect all of that and track that. So yeah, let's make sure to highlight that in the video as well.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. It's in the description of this video. Perfect.
Cool. Awesome.
Thank you so much, Jay. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for setting this up.
My pleasure.
And I hope this was useful. And then yeah, keep going with Visual Calcs. And if there's any questions, concerns, please raise them. And yeah, thanks for trying it out. And I hope you stay excited for the preview and keep joining us on this journey as we get Visual Calcs to general availability.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much.
Cool. No worries. All good.